Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here again. We are at the fifth episode of Neonatiki's Ampersand series. Um, this series looks at talking to professional dancers who are also engaged in a parallel or an additional career. So today we have a very interesting artist with us, Brinda Sarah Jacob. Just to briefly introduce her, Brinda is a dancer, a movement based expressive arts therapist, and an authentic movement practitioner and trainer, and a natural dream work practitioner. She is passionate about the arts, the mysterious working of the psyche soma, and the connections between body and earth. I can promise you a very interesting discussion today, not only because she is a beautiful dancer and a very interesting artist, but also because we will be touching on some themes that are very important and very relevant to the space we are today. I have a request from Brenda, so I'm just going to add her to this discussion.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi,
Oh, amazing. I can hear you. Can you
I
hear
can
me
hear you too.
clearly?
Yeah.
Great. Just for context, everyone, we had a little bit of issues with sound when we tested this earlier, but it seems to be fine, so that's great. Thank you so much for joining us, Brenda. It's really nice to talk to you today and for you to be the next step in this entire series, which has been very interesting. So thank you for making the time to be here with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start just really simply. I would like you to just share with our viewers and the people who are part of this conversation already a little bit about your journey with dance and how you took dance to where you are as an artist today, and how you got into dance therapy and how th those two professions sort of talk to each other. Can you run us through that?
Sure. So, like most South Indian girls, I studied Bharatanatyam as a child. Um, I did a little performance when I was 3, and I loved it. I loved performing. And, I got bored a little bit of classical dance. When in my teenager years, I went into, I think at that time it was called Western dance. And I enjoyed it for a bit, but I felt neither classical dance nor Western dance really held me the way I wanted to be held. And then I met, I had auditioned for a the musical, and Madhu Natraj was choreographing it. So I met Madhu, and I was introduced to contemporary dance, and that really kind of, I felt like, oh, this is what I want to do. So I was dancing professionally from the time I was 17, and I worked with the STEM dance company since till I was 30. But as much as I love performance, I felt that I came alive with dancing in a way uh, like no other. And I'm sure everybody knows that, right? And it was a high that went beyond performance, beyond being on stage. And I was kind of curious to understand that more, to share that more. So I was doing a lot of work with people with disability because I just felt there was so much joy in just being in the body. And and then I found out about dance therapy, and then I actually got a fellowship to intern under a dance therapist in the UK,
Mhm.
and that kind of again clicked something for me. And then when I came back, I kind of trained as a counselor and did a series of training in various art therapies, and I've always been bringing therapy and healing and movement and the body together. So for me, I know it sounds like two different careers, but I actually think it's just an extension of the same thing. I feel very I know so I went from the creative space to the healing space, and and I most of my day is in the healing space. I work as a therapist. I have clients. I teach expressive art therapy. I facilitate programs, but I also know that I miss performance and the creative aspect. So I think they kind of interview for me. I need the creative and I need the therapeutic. One without the other feels a bit incomplete. So yeah, there's just two streams where between which I find myself, I think. Yeah.
It's interesting. We've had five, you're the fifth of this series. And what I found most interesting in these conversations is that almost everyone we've talked to will say it sounds like they're separate things, but they're actually quite connected and they talk to each
Yeah.
other and they inform each other. And I found that to be a very interesting pattern coming from the artists that we've talked to. Um, like the one I interviewed 2 weekends ago also said this. She's
Oh,
working in
really?
special education and working in Bharatanatyam and Carnatic music. And she also said they
Yeah.
talk to each other. It doesn't feel different, really.
Yeah, I would
Um,
think special education and
yeah,
dance would be a good fit as well.
yeah.
But I do
Speaking
know
of
that you
which,
also have lawyers and dancers, and I wonder how that
yeah,
that moves.
that one I think hasn't happened yet. And if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken, she's in this conversation. So we will
Okay.
also be talking to her a couple of weekends from now. You have also worked with people with special needs, special situations. What has that experience been like?
Well, I'm trained to do that, so it's work, and I
Mm,
enjoy it.
mm,
I don't do so much of it anymore because I tend to be working now a lot with therapists.
mm,
But earlier I started dance therapy working with children with autism.
mm.
I did a lot of work with with people on the spectrum, and now I've moved. Now most of my clients are actually therapists themselves who are kind of
Okay.
interested in deeper work. And I also
Mm,
feel my own process kind of really is leading me to work with women. That's that's what I'm really passionate about and interested in,
mm.
to really hear women's voices. And I think we're hearing a lot. I mean, I feel like it's a very potent time to be a woman.
Yeah.
I think the
Mm,
voices are really coming out strong, and I'm very interested in that.
mm,
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, so I think yeah, I'm interested in the feminine, and uh, my work in expressive art therapy is in the container of Jungian theory, Carl Jung's theory, and
mm,
he actually talks about something that I find very fascinating. So we have the Holy Trinity of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is the
mm.
upright triangle, and he talks about the inverted triangle, which is the body, the shadow, and the feminine.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I really feel like at a time like this, there is a real resurgence of that. And so working, and they bring all my three passions together, really, the body and movement and psychotherapy.
Maybe to just break it down a little bit, partly for me, partly for other people who may not know.
Sure.
Yesterday when we were talking, you were talking about how you moved from a workshop sort of format into creating your own movement vocabulary and using it in your therapy sessions. These are
Yeah.
terms that a lot of us have heard before, dance therapy, movement therapy. Can you maybe break that down for us and tell us, what that process is with your students or your clients or people who are looking for a healing process? How would that, if I were to come to you, how would it work? What would
Okay.
you ask of me?
Sure. So, so the arts, like all artists know, we're really drawing a lot from our unconscious material. So even while we're creating something that may be commissioned, there's something of us that is in the product, right? Which is
Yeah,
why we're so attached to what we create. It's so much who we are.
yeah,
So that's really the premise under which expressive art therapy works, is working with unconscious material that surfaces when you engage with the arts.
mm,
Yeah, with dance therapy itself, I find it really potent because you're working with the body, and I think the body really holds a lot that has been repressed. So if you think of the mind as a conscious self, the body really is the unconscious. So a lot of the unconscious is in the body. So
mm,
emotions that have been difficult, memories, trauma, all of that is held in the body. It doesn't disappear.
mm,
So when you move your body, you release a lot of that. Yes. So which is why sometimes you can move and you can really be moved to tears, or or you see that in animals. An animal that has experienced trauma, you'll see them shaking. It's their
mm,
way of releasing it from their muscle.
mm,
Yeah. So any kind of movement will do that. So dance therapy really is a very designed way of structuring a session that works with breath, that works with body, to access or to see what is emerging or what is alive for us in the here and now, and to find a way to give it form. And when you give it form, it kind of is a little separate from you. You release it from you. And sometimes you access it's not all difficult stuff. Sometimes you access power, you access vitality, Um, yeah. Does that make sense? Or is it?
I was actually about to say that it sounds like a really rewarding process on both sides, I imagine. When you
Yeah.
see someone transform, that must be
I mean, I,
quite
I
amazing.
can't, I can't think of anything more exciting. And I also love it because, I mean, we all have a very functional, beautiful body, in whatever shape and form. And even those of us who are with illness, who are struggling or working with illness, um, there is a kind of engagement with the body beyond seeing it as a physical, um, beyond just the physical manifestation of it. There's a
Mm,
wisdom that's held in the body that, in our engagement, kind of guides us into what is possible.
mm,
So I think, and sometimes I think this is problematic with dancers, is we think we have a body. We are kind of always trying to get fitter and more
mm.
skilled, and we forget that we are bodies. We are, and we
I
need
was
to.
actually about to ask you that because I think as artists we're on display a lot, right? It's not only about how I mean I
Yeah,
think that it's partly how that we think we have bodies and that we're also trained to look at ourselves and other people that way. So
yeah.
when you're in that dance therapy spaces, is unraveling that difficult for you? Like was that a process?
Yes, it was, and it still is. I mean, I
Mm,
still struggle as I age to
mm,
be loving and accepting of my body,
yeah,
and allowing it to take the form it needs to take and take the time it needs to take and the rest it needs. I am
yeah,
very much, I'm in my mind, I want to be doing the things I was doing at 30. And it's, I mean, it's not that it's not possible, but do I need to is the question, you
yeah.
know,
And
and
how?
what else, yeah, and what else is possible actually? There's a different
Yeah,
kind of depth available now.
yeah,
And isn't that actually more interesting that there are so many
yeah,
more stories,
yeah,
but it's not easy because the ego wants to, the ego wants what it knows,
yeah.
and wants what was celebrated and what is celebrated in the community.
Mm,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Do you think you can think of one? I mean, I don't know if this is privileged information, but can you tell us about a transformation that maybe made you feel like this is why I do what I do?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of so many. I'm just trying to figure out which one to. I have I have a few. Okay, I have a story that I can share, which is with a client that I was working with. Uh, she was struggling with anorexia, and so anorexia is really a disconnect from the body. It's all wanting to be in the mind and a kind of really yearning towards the spirit at the
Mm,
cost of the body, like really shunning the
mm,
body. So we did, I mean, really a very simple activity that I do with a lot of my students. Is just this. We did these three triangles where the bottom triangle is from your waist. So we just kind of embody it and we draw it. The bottom triangle is the grounding triangle. The center
mm,
triangle is the centering triangle, and then you have the last triangle, which is the connecting triangle. And we look at grounding, centering, connection, and see where we are and how we're aligned. And she drew these triangles, and she drew the center at the top of her head, top of
oh,
the
wow.
third triangle. And then she
Mm,
looked at it, and it really hit her, and she was like, wow, I'm not centered. I have no idea of my body. And it's
mm,
just so simple.
yeah.
But when you see it on a piece of paper and you see that you've drawn it,
Mm,
and then she wrote this beautiful poem around it, which is something that she has, she, and such a wise poem. She was, at that time, she was 15 years old, and it's something that she uses. Those words of wisdom continue to guide her. um, in her struggle with anorexia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow, that's really amazing that
yeah,
you were able to, I guess, create the space where she was able to make that discovery for herself. That's amazing.
yeah. I think what we do is we're trained to facilitate and to hold space, a safe space, so that the
Hmm.
psyche feels safe enough to reveal itself, and then you see it, and then if it's in an art form, I mean, if you can move it, but then when you draw it, it's there in hard copy, so it can really, I mean, the feedback you get from that can be quite powerful,
Yeah.
because you're drawing from your unconscious. You're not drawing. No, nobody's told you to draw that.
Yeah. I have a slightly process-oriented question, so bear
Sure.
with me while I try to articulate this. What you're describing right now is a lot about the process, the
Yeah.
exploration, the discoveries you make on the way.
Yeah.
Whereas as performing artists, at some point it becomes about the product you're putting out there, right?
Yeah.
So as a dance therapist and as a dancer, do you find that you have to make that switch at some point when you're about to put something on stage, or do you have the same organic sort of process even when you're creating for stage?
No. Well, when I'm creating, it's very organic,
Hmm.
because the process I'm so grounded in. But
Yeah.
when I put it on stage, it's a real struggle, because
Oh yeah.
the minute there's an audience, I
Mm.
mean, it is a performance. It's no
Mm.
longer the process. If the process unfolds in a real safety, which is
Yeah.
lost when it's on stage, because you don't know who's coming, you don't know what mindset they're in and how they're watching you.
Yeah.
So yeah, but and I tend to do more and more work right now. My interest is to work with the stories that are held in the body. So a lot of it is authentic movement. I use a lot of therapeutic processes to access this content, but
Mm.
yeah, it's not easy, and I
Yeah,
don't think I've found a way.
definitely.
I mean, I'm still finding that way to
I wonder if it's just the path that we have to walk for our entire careers as dancers. I don't know if it's ever like a
yeah,
I
I
have
think,
figured this out
yeah,
point.
no, I think if somebody's choreographing me, it's simple.
Mm.
Then
Right.
my body does what is being asked,
What
and
it's
I
yeah.
miss that, and I really want to find some people to do that. And I love being directed, by theater director. I mean, I love, and but I think I find much harder is to find my story, which is what I want to do and I want to share, and to find a way to showcase that
Yeah.
in its authenticity and integrity without it really becoming too performative.
Right.
And it's tough, but I think, um, but I mean, so that is one particular struggle. But I feel otherwise. I feel uh, the 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 work with the process really adds depth to the performance.
Yeah.
So I mean, even to a really choreographed dance, just your process holds a certain depth, so you have a certain presence, and I think all of that is beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
um,
I think when something comes from an authentic, organic place, it typically does
yeah,
form a product that will speak to somebody.
yeah,
I think authenticity is the goal usually.
yeah,
Just to go back a little bit when you were talking about the fact that you've gotten very interested with working with women and the issues that are important to them. You were also talking to me yesterday about your Desire project and what
mm.
you're trying to do there. And I think the first thing I'd like to ask you is to tell us what Desire is, and then tell us what you're trying to do with this project.
Okay, okay. So actually, I think in 2012, uh, when we worked, when I'm sure everybody remembers the gang rape in Delhi in the bus. So when I was teaching dance at that point, and I noticed that a lot of my students, when we were doing improvisation and authentic movement, there was a lot of rage, and and I
Yeah.
realized that it was a response to what was happening. So I was interested in collecting these stories, and we created a piece called Disbelief, and it really looked at the body, with the site of the feminine as a site of wounding. um, and as we were working with that piece, one of the uh, things we felt that the next step really is to have ownership around desire. But that was an intellectual thought, you know. If I have ownership around my body and around desire, that would be empowerment. But that was really a thought. But in my personal process, in 2014, 15, I really started feeling like desire was important. And desire was also very controlled, especially for a woman who's married and has kids. How much desire is she allowed? And there are all these thoughts and conversations. But then I moved into the body, and I was in an authentic movement residency with my teacher. And what felt confusing, actually, when you enter the body, is actually just celebratory, and and what I accessed was sense of being alive, like really libido and life force and like potentiality, and it was very exciting. And then that kind of made me interested in thinking like, okay, if we move away from thoughts that we have around desire and we move into the body and stay with sensation and emotion and experience, what opens up. And it was a really personal journey for me, and what I noticed opened up for me was the other, or the object of desire, falls away, and this desire becomes a life force within us, guiding us to becoming who we truly are. Because our greatest desire, our greatest longing, is to be who we truly are, in our fullest expression of who we are. And this longing gets projected onto people and objects, but when you really work with sensation, it forms a road. And I find that it's a very spiritual experience as well, and for me, what I'd seen for years about Krishna and Radha, and always thinking like, oh man, this Radha really must she be so besotted with Krishna. But finally understanding that when the desire is when you really hold desire in its full form, it's complete. The other is completely irrelevant,
Yeah.
and so for me, that's a really interesting. Um, I think it's important for us to access it. I think as a society, we've really crushed women's desire. We crush it, especially in the country we live in. But I think all over the world, I think it's a result of patriarchy. It's a result of ownership, right? With wanting to know paternity, who's the father, So that's a way of
Yeah.
controlling the woman. So I really do believe that the way to empowerment is for each of us to take ownership of desire, to know that our desires are valid and must always be honored. And
Yeah.
honoring one's desire is different from acting out, and that is really your choice. But honoring it is something that we can all do, and that opens the field a lot. Yeah. So what I do is I do workshops with women and men, um, because for me it's about the essence of the feminine and the principles of the feminine rather than the
Yeah.
woman itself. So,
Right.
and I think both men and women, I think that resurgence is important in both men and women. So I do workshops. I did a performance around it. I'm now working on film called Spiraling into Desire. So yeah, I think it's a project. It's been 5 years, but I feel like I've just scratched the surface. There's really
I believe you. There is so much. I have so many questions. It's
yeah,
for one thing, it's amazing that there are so many different paths that this has taken, workshops and
mm,
film, and I'm sure plenty of research and plenty of
yeah,
conversations with different kinds of people. So one of the first things I want to ask you about this is that these are difficult topics. These
hmm,
are personal, sometimes I think can be met with embarrassment or they're
sure,
difficult things even for the most, city educated, whatever. We
yeah,
have these ideas that we're so comfortable with who we are, but I think that there can be certain amount of discomfort in opening up and exploring these things, discussing it with other people. In your workshops, how do you break that down? How do you create a space where someone is able to open up to things that, even if it's
Yeah,
not embarrassment, but could be privacy,
yeah,
the
sure, sure.
willingness to let go of that. How do
Yeah.
you deal with that?
Well, one is it's a very safe space. So I really, really take a lot of time to create that safe space. Yeah.
Mm.
And, so you have all the confidentiality, all of that. Two is most of the embarrassment and shame or guilt around our desires come from the narratives around it. But in my workshop, we're not working with the narratives. We're not working with the thoughts or the
Yeah.
discussions. We're really dropping into the body and
Mm.
we're working with sensation. Of course, we also access shame. We also access, but we access them as body responses, which don't always need to be articulated or verbalized,
Right.
but just needs to be processed. And I find that it's easier to do and it's a lot less confusing.
Mm.
And it's a direct experience, which I also think is the way the feminine works. It's really about
Mm.
the direct experience, about the intimacy of the process, as opposed to an intellectual understanding of something.
Yeah, for sure. Do you work with a large age range of people, and do you find that their responses to this are different?
I find that the response is almost always the same.
Oh,
It's just most people are deeply moved to access this side of themselves, and there's a lot of grief in not having met this side for so long, and
mm.
but there's a lot of joy, and so it's usually a very moving experience,
Mm.
um, at whatever age, at whatever age, and it's beautiful for me to watch 60-year-olds, men and women, 60, I also 70-year-old men and women,
Wow.
just feeling the joy of feeling desire of having, desire being valid, but
Yeah.
of course there's grief of it being suppressed for so many years as well. Uh,
Anita ma'am is here as a part of this conversation, and she's just said, beautiful, drop the narrative and drop right into the body. What a great way to break through the cultural baggage. Um,
Thank you, Anita, man. And
yeah, it's
I don't know if she remembers me, but I have, I have been part of with STEM Meta, and I'm a big fan. So I don't know if she remembers me. Yeah,
I must agree with her comment as well. This must be very intense, very delicate, I imagine, and also quite
yeah,
explosive when something is discovered. I think I'm sure it can be a really moving experience from what you described.
yeah.
Well, she
It's
does
very
remember you. There you go.
that feels good.
Sorry, you were saying, go ahead.
Um, yeah, it's very moving, it's very powerful, and I feel like once you meet that side of you, you're not the same person.
Yeah.
Something has shifted, and I feel like there's a lot more. Uh, First of all, you're passionate and you're alive, and there's a lot more kind of intention to live your true life. To speak
Hmm.
your truth and to live that. And for me, I think if each of us did that, the world would be a different place, or really a
Yeah.
different place.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like this, for me, really, this reclaiming eros, I think is a form of activism. And yeah,
Yeah. I can completely agree with that. Um, I would like to just quickly maybe talk to you a little bit about what the last year and a half has been,
sure,
given, the intimate nature of the work you do.
yeah,
And when you talk about creating a safe space, it could be also about the physical space and that
yeah,
completely shifting, given,
yeah.
the conditions in which we've been practicing our various art forms and vocations in. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you've adjusted to that, adapted to it? Has it been hard for you?
Um, well, it's been different.
Mm,
It's had a lot of unexpectedly good things, which we didn't expect, and of course
mm,
the difficult stuff as well. I'm very excited when the lockdown ends and I can go back to the studio. But
Oh, me too.
yeah, and to actually have the bodies in the same space.
Yeah.
But I want to say I was very, very pleasantly surprised to notice how much was possible on Zoom. Our entire
Mm.
training shifted on Zoom. And I found myself now when I sit with a client, a lot earlier was really observing the client. Now it's a box and it's usually just the face. And I find
Yeah.
that what I do is tune into myself to access what's going on between us, what's
Oh,
being
that's
shared.
interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's been pretty, it's been in some ways more clarity actually.
Yeah.
And now when I go back to the studio, I have both skills, and it's great. It's also opened our work to so many more people, which is wonderful.
So you find you have people from other parts of the world or other
Yeah,
cities joining you?
yeah. It's also, I'm able to study so much from people that which I never thought I
Yeah.
would do earlier. So that's also
Yeah.
been great. Um, some difficulties, sometimes clients don't have privacy in their home to do the sessions.
Mm.
So that was kind of heartbreaking because they
Mm.
couldn't leave their homes and the home itself was difficult. It's a
Yeah.
difficult space, so that connection, was hard to maintain. Yeah, so yeah, that I think that was the biggest struggle, is
Yeah.
when the client doesn't have. So we did keep our office space open, and sometimes clients could go there and meet
Mm.
me on Zoom. But
Okay.
still, during lockdown, even that was hard.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Um, you said something yesterday that hit me very hard. You said a practitioner must be on their own journey. And one of the things I'd like to ask you about that is as, in your work in dance therapy as a mental health specialist, um, how do you manage your own struggles? This is something that I've always asked people who are in that space where, you're taking on someone else's
yeah,
stories and other people's burdens all the time. And while that's important work, I'm sure it can be extremely overwhelming.
yeah,
How do
yeah,
you manage your struggles and your, especially in a place like this where, a lot of the struggles that people are having in a pandemic is universal in
yeah,
some sense. We're all struggling with
yeah.
similar things. How do you handle it when you're trying to help someone with a problem
Well,
that you also are struggling with?
one of the rules we have at SMART is that everybody is in personal work. That everybody has their own therapist to go to. I've been in personal
Mm.
work since 2003. I don't think there's been a year that I've missed. I love it. I mean, I love it. And so I also do, I have a dream worker, I have a therapist, I have someone I work with. So I have different ways of accessing myself. I'm also in supervision. So when there's
Okay.
parts of me that's leaking into the space that, I have a supervisor, I have peer supervision, I have, colleagues that we discuss this with. So all of this just goes to keep that psychic hygiene.
Mm.
Um, and so you're really able to really be present to what the client is bringing in because
Yeah.
your stuff is being taken care of. I think that's, I think that's only ethical.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
There's no other way to do it. And I really also feel, and for me personally, there are different ways you can study and become a therapist. Like you can do all the years of studies, or I feel like you can do the inner work
Mm.
because as I deepen my inner journey, I find that I'm able to hold so much more, and I'm able to hold that space for my client to enter their journey.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's the way I do it, and I feel, and that's the way I teach. That's the way we call our students do it as well. Like it's really the
Mm.
personal journey comes first. It's
Yeah.
like the airplane, right? The oxygen mask, the mother puts it first before. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's just,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's the right way to do it.
yeah. It's the
Yeah.
clean way to do it.
I would just like to quickly tell our audience, everyone who's still here, that if you have questions for Brinda, this is the time to ask her. We would love for this to be an interactive conversation. So if you have something to ask her about contemporary dance, about dance therapy, about the many interesting things she said today, this is the time you want to ask these questions. And while we give them a few minutes to do that, I'd like to ask you, you said you have a dream dream worker. Is that the
Yeah,
term you
and
used?
I'm a dream
I
work
would love if
practitioner.
you tell me a little bit about what that is. I feel like these are words that we've heard, but I don't know if
Yeah,
we understand what the work involves. So
sure.
if you can tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so dream work is just working with your dreams. So you journal your dreams, and
Mm,
I work with somebody. I also work with my clients on their dreams. Um, so I find that again, it's just the unconscious material, right? What is not
mm,
being processed consciously. So this is I think, and this is what I understand, or I believe very strongly, is that like we all know that our body, left on its own, is constantly moving towards healing. Yeah, you have a cut, your body's going to heal it. There's certain healing that's already in place.
mm,
Similarly, the psyche moves towards healing and balance. Yeah, so what happens when we dream is stuff that's not been processed is getting processed in the unconscious. Yeah,
mm.
so it's already, there's a process happening.
Oh, I think we may have lost her. Did
Oh, can you
we
hear me?
lose you? I
Sorry,
think
can
we
you hear?
lost you for a bit. Can you maybe backtrack
Oh, did
a
I?
sentence or
Sorry.
two?
Sure, sure,
Yeah, no, that's okay.
sure. So I was saying, in dream, uh, the dreams itself is a process. Yeah,
Yeah.
it that works towards healing. What we're not consciously working on in our conscious life, kind of unconsciously we're working on with our dreams. And
Mm,
when you actually work with dreams, you're consciously engaging with the unconscious. So you're
yeah.
bringing in this. So the healing is faster. The possibilities are faster. So,
Mm,
for example, my desire project started from a dream that I had in 2014 or 13.
mm,
I just had, it was not even a dream, it was just an image, which was of something opening and closing, and it would
mm,
come to me repeatedly and sometimes in my meditation. And then I noticed that the texture of it was like elephant skin. And sometimes it would be pink, sometimes red, and it would open, close. And then I realized, oh my God, they're lips. But I still had no idea why lips were coming to me. And then I noticed that the lips itself was attached to a tube. And then
mm,
later in the dreams, there were lips at the bottom. And then I realized, oh my God, it's my lips and my yoni. Those are the two lips, and that really began my process around desire.
mm,
So when you consciously work with it, there's so much that, I feel like the the depths each of us hold is, you can't measure it. It's really a whole different world. And if you enter it, it is such a richness. And the more you engage with it, the more like treasure you come up with, that kind of you can work with, you can let go of. And then my dreams kind of, so then, and then I was kind of really interested in desire. And then I noticed my one dream that I had where I was there was a kissing competition and I was kissing this woman, and I could really feel that, my desire was way bigger than this competition. And suddenly the dream gets switches uh, to an abusive relationship that I was in with, and the trauma of that. And then I realized, okay, my desire is on the other side of my trauma. So it leads you to work with what I don't really want to work with. But yeah. So I mean, for me, the dreaming body, the moving body, they're all the same. They're just ways to engage with depth with yourself. Yeah, sometimes I feel like my whole thing is so narcissistic. It's all about like there's a whole world that's so exciting, and it's exciting for me when clients discover that as well.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
so
think it is at all. I think
well.
it's
It's
just
yeah,
internal work that I think maybe we haven't been encouraged to do very
yeah,
much, you know.
yeah,
In fact, as you were describing your dreams to us, I was thinking I don't remember mine. Like
well,
I'll wake up with this vague sort of I feel like I dreamt about something. So there was a period of time when I used to try to journal, but I don't always remember. So I feel like it's also about preparing yourself
yeah.
to,
If you actually keep a
watch
journal,
out for it.
if you keep a journal and a pen next to you, you'll find you remember more and more.
Hmm.
And an intention to remember. And you don't have to remember the whole dream. Even an image or a sensation or a feeling from it,
Hmm.
It's enough to
Mm.
work. If you have an experienced dream worker, that's enough to start
Mm.
off. Yeah.
I've learned about a new profession today. Thank you very much. This is really, really genuinely very interesting. And I think that in so many ways, we've learned how to sort of separate ourselves from our intuition, our instinct, our dreams, and everything's become very external, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it can be, I think it also sounds a little scary to me. I don't know
Mm.
if like you don't know what you're going to discover, and I can imagine that that could be a little overwhelming.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we all should be rightly cautious. Like we're
Hmm.
not diving into this. We're really doing it with people who are trained and
Yeah,
supportive, and it comes from it. I just feel like it has to be held in a space of love, unconditional love, which we're all learning to find
hmm.
for ourselves. It's not easy. We
Yeah,
can easily love another, but loving ourselves is not that easy. But this work can only happen with unconditional love and unconditional courage. You need
hmm.
both. And you need the courage to be able to love, and you need the
Yeah.
love to find the courage. So it's again a kind of,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
think you've created a beautiful web for us with a lot of interconnecting things and so much to unravel and so much to explore. Um, I just want to check again if we have any questions from our audience. I think this would be a great time to check with us. I'm feeling very like I have all these things I want to explore now, and I think it would be um, for anybody, right? Like not you
Oh,
don't have to be a
absolutely.
professional artist to
Absolutely.
want to
Oh
do
my God.
this.
Yeah, absolutely. For
Yeah.
anybody. I mean, at one point I was like, oh, they should just teach this in schools.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like
but
let's not wait till we're
yeah,
older before we
yeah,
start thinking about what's in our heads.
yeah. Or in our
Yeah.
bodies.
Yeah. So quickly, everybody, this is the time to ask questions if you want to. Before we wrap up for this evening. Um, so while people are articulating their questions, if there are any, I would just like to ask you, if you were to just give everybody a little bit of, let's say, advice on how to prepare themselves for this kind of work. Like we were just talking about how overwhelming or scary it can be, or maybe there's a little bit of resistance to it sometimes. What would you tell someone who's
Well,
deciding, do I want to do this or not?
okay. So first of all, I think what I want to say is the psyche has a wisdom that's beyond what we can comprehend.
Mm,
So generally, you're not given more than you can handle.
mm,
It's really, so I've been doing this work since 2003. I've been with working with a therapist. So it's as you get more and more experience, you go more and more deeper, the stuff. So you're always given, I feel, what you can handle, unless we're talking about exceptional cases of illness, right? Mental health,
yeah.
which is different. Um, so I feel like there's no need to be too worried. I can understand the fear, but fear
Mm,
and excitement are two sides of the same coin. So feel into the excitement and go. I think the work happens step by step. You don't have to dive into the middle of the sea, but really
yeah.
enter at a pace that's comfortable for you. Again, an experienced therapist or dream worker creates that space for you, creates that safety for you. Um,
Mm,
but I think it's like a whole new world,
yeah.
that's really just yours. And why wouldn't you want it? Like it's for you. If you're entitled to it,
Yeah.
yeah. Clearly,
Yeah.
I love it. So, um,
Yeah. And I think that that's something that we need to allow
yeah.
ourselves in some way,
So ways
right?
to prepare, I think. Sorry, I feel like I must say this is actually it requires a slowing down. So I think Jung says this happens after 40, because I think till then we're collecting experiences and we're doing things and we're trying to build our careers and our families. But this work really requires a lot of space, slowing down. It's almost the rhythm of nature. It's not the
Hmm.
rhythm that we're living in the world right now, which is actually quite unnatural.
Yeah.
It's not so fast. It's much slower, and unfortunately, a lot of us don't have the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
Make
takes
the
time.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really nice note for us to wrap up on, for something that you do for yourself from a place of conviction and honesty and um, empathy also. I think that's
Yeah.
really important. So if there are no questions, then I will wrap up for this evening, and say thank you, Brinda, for making this time for us and touching upon some really, I thought they were very intense and very important things that we
Important.
talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also fun. I hope I didn't make it sound like it was
Oh no,
so
that's
hard
not
to
what I meant. I'm
yeah.
so sorry if it came off
No,
that way.
yeah.
I just mean that there's so much potential for
Yeah.
what you can find in a space
Yeah.
like this, and I think that's exciting for sure. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing your
Thank you,
experiences and
Meghna,
your
for being so
yeah.
lovely and being such a wonderful interviewer. Thank you. It was so much
Thank
fun.
you very much. It was really nice connecting with you. For everyone who's listening, next Saturday we'll have another such interview. Janni will be interviewing one more artist on their work as dancers and their allied careers. And we'd love to have you tune into that. This will also be posted on our timelines, on the Neo Nartiki timeline. So if you have someone you want to share this conversation with, you can share the video with them later. We'd love to see you again. Please join us next weekend. Thank you, Brinda.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Neo
Meghna.
Nartaki, for giving both
Yeah.
of us the opportunity
Yeah.
to have
Thank
this
you,
conversation.
Nartaki. Thank you, Anita, for tuning in.
Yeah.
See you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have an amazing weekend. Bye.